Welcome, friends, to the Living Truth Podcast. Michael Carey with you here today. And in this episode, I'll be sharing the 5 keys to freedom from unwanted sexual behavior, which I discovered many years ago. Now, friends, this podcast is for everyone, not just for those who struggle. Certainly, it's going to benefit the men and women who struggle, but also parents and partners who have been hurt, as well as pastors. Parents, definitely listen to the whole podcast before you share it with your teen, but it certainly can also benefit teens who struggle. So then, in order to make things easier, I want to say that I'll just talk as if I'm speaking to the person who struggles with unwanted sexual behavior. Most of the cases and the people that I work with are males that deal with problematic sexual behavior, so I'll use pronouns like you and maybe him or he and such. But I just want to say there are obviously, or maybe it's not obvious to you, but lots and lots of women who struggle with this as well as men. So first I want to give you a brief background as to how I came to discover these 5 keys in the first place. So I was introduced to porn and masturbation at about age 11. I knew it wasn't something that I should be doing, so I kept it a secret. But I started looking at porn every chance that I had. This behavior just escalated into more frequent and then more risky behavior throughout my teen years and into early adulthood. At age 25, I met Jesus, and I thought that he'd magically take away this problem. But that didn't happen. Now, it stopped for a little while, but eventually it was right back. I was right back into it. Now, as a believer, I was even more ashamed than before of this behavior, so I continued to keep it a secret, even more terrified to tell anyone. And when I was dating, I thought that marriage would solve the problem. When I got married, it stopped for a little bit in the beginning, but just like when I became a Christian, I went right back to it again. I eventually cheated on my spouse, and she divorced. Now, as painful as that experience was, I continued engaging in this problematic sexual behavior. Among many different things, now I was using it to medicate the pain of a divorce. Now, almost 5 years later, when I was dating, I realized that if I didn't eradicate this behavior from my life, I'd likely end up marrying and bringing this unwanted behavior into that marriage, which would likely cause yet another divorce. I realize now that this epiphany really came directly from God. You know, he helped me get to a place of desperation for help. And in that desperation, I was fully ready. And as a result, I found the 5 keys to freedom. You know, as they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Before this, if I had encountered the 5 keys before going through all of this, I don't know if I would have engaged with them or not. But I was ready and I did it. And I dove in head first. Now, before I get into describing and teaching on the 5 keys, I want to address a couple of common misnomers that I hear from time to time. Okay, when I hear guys say, Jesus is the answer, while I agree that that is true, it's what we do with that information that will make all the difference in your path to freedom. If you only pray and ask God to take the problem away and then just continue in the behavior while you're praying and waiting, it isn't helpful at all. One example that comes to mind right away from the Bible is the Apostle Paul. You know, he prayed 3 times for God to remove a thorn in the flesh. While we don't know exactly what it was, God's answer was no. I prayed so many times, God, please take this problem away. And his answer was not no. It was no, he's not going to magically take it away, but there is a solution, which I was not ready to hear again until I encountered the 5 keys. Friend, if you've prayed more than 3 times, it's time to look to these 5 keys, because I believe this is the answer to your prayer, just like it was to me so many years ago. Now, a couple more examples from Scripture would be 2 Kings 5 and Matthew 15. In 2 Kings, God tells a man that he must take action to be healed. In this case, I think he has leprosy. He has to wash in the river 7 times. And then in Matthew 15:19, Jesus clearly tells us it's out of the heart that come things like sexual immorality and many other behaviors that he describes. Matthew 15:19 also addresses the other lie that the solution to your porn problem is more about fixing the problems with marital sex or any other changes therein. Friend, I'm sorry, but if my wife was unable or unwilling, I'm pretty sure I'm not forced to look at porn. I won't take the time to address whether or not your wife's behavior is sinful, which if we did look under the hood, I'm quite sure 99.9% of the time we'd find that it isn't. But even if she were acting in a sinful way, how would this justify more sin? That doesn't make any sense at all, does it? Before my next comment on this, though, I want you to know that I'm not speaking in judgment here. You know, if I didn't have those exact same thoughts at some point in my life, well, I can tell you plenty of other immature thoughts and blaming and things that I've done throughout my life. But I speak to you in a direct way because I want you to be free. So friend, it's an immature response to fix blame on someone else for your own inappropriate behavior. Don't make excuses. Own your behavior and dive into the work that I'm about to lay out for you. Okay, so enough ranting for now. Let's dig into the 5 keys. What would you be thinking about if I told you, don't think about a pink elephant? You're thinking about a pink elephant right now, aren't you? One of the many reasons using this same approach to quitting problematic sexual behavior is if you're simply just, what's happening, you're just trying harder to not do something. And while you're doing that, trying not to do something, that something is still on the forefront of your mind. And if it's on your mind every day, you're actually far more likely to turn toward it rather than away from it. Likewise, trying not to think about it, focusing all your effort on casting the thoughts away when they come, this doesn't work either because it's still in that category of trying not to do something. And it isn't addressing the root cause of why you behave that way in the first place. One of the Bible verses that I hear men quoting on this topic is in 2 Corinthians. It says that we should take every thought captive. This is another verse that isn't helpful unless we dive deeper and understand what God is really telling us here. If you think about the context in 2 Corinthians here, when you read the prior couple of verses, you'll learn that the context is warfare. In any military operation, what do you do when you take a captive? If you answered, you just kill them, that's not what we want to do. But that's what you want to do with your thoughts, right? You want to kill your thoughts. No. We interrogate them. What's causing this thought? Where did it come from? What was happening around me during the 24 to 48 hours before the thought came? What I'm describing here that we should this actually fits into key number 3, okay? Interrogating the thought. But key number 1 is stop trying to stop. Focusing all your efforts simply on trying to stop doesn't get you anywhere. We have a term for this and it's called behavior management. And it really is just a form of control. So if you've been compulsively engaged in problematic sexual behavior for more than 5 years, and since you're listening to the podcast, it's likely been a lot longer than that. Friend, you're already far beyond having any control over this behavior. Again, there's no judgment here. I've been through all of this. So many of these things that I'm talking about are my story as well. Trying to stop. Behavior management. I have done all of it. Trying to keep it under control. It isn't the answer. So stop trying to stop. The next 4 keys are really the action items necessary to truly achieve freedom. So let's move on into key number 2. You know, when a man comes to me and says, "Oh, I know what needs to happen. I just need a better accountability partner," or "I just need to pray harder and read my Bible more," or "I just need to get rid of all my technology, put that blocker and the accountability software on." Okay, all those things are great ideas, but they all just fall back into that behavior management category. Now, I also put into question, though, the level of humility and the true desire to be free this person has because of those first statements that I said. I know what needs to happen. Well, if you know what needs to happen, why are you still behaving this way, friend? Right? What needs to happen is we need to get to a place where we know that we don't have all the answers. We need to get into a posture of seeking help. And I'm so grateful that I got to a place where I wanted desperately to be free. I got to a place where I was willing to do anything, legal, moral, and ethical, to achieve that freedom. I was told to go see a counselor. I promptly called and made an appointment. I didn't care if anyone thought I was crazy or screwed up by seeing a counselor. Freedom was more important than how I looked. And by the way, I already knew I was crazy and screwed up anyway. Whatever the financial investment was, I realigned my budget to the point of adjusting savings, whatever it is that needed to happen, because freedom was more important. You see, retiring in style, alone and divorced, didn't appeal to me. Retiring with far less finances, but a life partner and walking in freedom is far better. The counselor recommended 2 books. I left his office and drove directly to the bookstore and searched for those books. I didn't have a Kindle back then, or I'd have bought the book in the parking lot at the counselor's office. I started reading the books that night and finished them in record time, for me not being a reader at the time. Now, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. Many people have reached this same place. We call it rock bottom. You see, when you're at the end of your rope, the student is ready, as they say. Key number 2 is you must fully surrender. Fully surrender, for me, meant my prayer for God to take it away changed. I prayed and I told God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll read whatever you want me to read. I'll invest whatever you want me to invest. And I'll even tell whoever you want me to tell. As hard as it was, I really meant that. I'll tell whoever you want me to tell. Now, that doesn't mean that I had to rent a billboard, or that you have to rent a billboard or post over social media. But it likely does mean talking with the adults that you care about the most. Unfortunately, many people need a major life event, like a marital separation or an ultimatum from a spouse, in order to truly hit this rock bottom. But it's not true in every case. As I mentioned earlier, I was divorced and I knew God had a wife for me. But if I didn't really deal with this problem I carried, I'd take it into that next marriage, and it would cause tremendous pain. The knowledge and truth of that pain, having actually went through the pain of divorce, this is what set me up for rock bottom. And rock bottom is defined like this. It's when continuing to engage in the unwanted behavior becomes far more painful than any pain I may need to face by surrendering to the real path to freedom and truly dealing with the problem. Now, if you haven't hit a rock bottom, don't give up hope. Surrender can also happen in phases, little by little. Start by surrendering to the process of the next 3 keys. So moving on to key number 3, you know, whether or not you've ever done any gardening, you probably understand what happens when you're trying to eliminate the weeds by just pulling the top off. What are you leaving behind in the ground? The roots. If you leave the roots down in the ground, the weed's going to come back. The same is true with unwanted sexual behavior. Key number 3 is you have to dig it up by the roots. Just like how we interrogate our thoughts, we search for the root cause of the behavior. Why do we do what we do? We dig into our heart. You know, that's exactly where Jesus said that the problem lies in Matthew 15:19. Part of the process of digging up the roots will happen in the next 2 keys. But I want to say right now, you have to see a counselor or a certified coach who has specialized experience with helping people with this specific problem. If you've had this problem for over 5 years, friend, seeing a professional isn't optional. Now, if you need help finding a professional, we know some excellent counselors and coaches. Just shoot an email to support@living-truth.org and ask our support team. So key number 1 is stop trying to stop. Key number 2, you have to fully surrender. Key number 3 is you have to dig it up by the roots. Key number 4 is you need real accountability to achieve freedom. I was introduced to the concept of an accountability partner many, many years ago. And the accountability group that I was in, you know, the 5 of us were given these set of questions. One of them was something along the line is porn still a problem in your life? I answered no. Well, that's where I stopped, was with the answer no. The rest of the thought that was in my head that I didn't say was because I had just given it up that morning or the day before, right? That's not real accountability. There's so many definitions as to what this needs to look like that I want to define exactly who this person should be and the nature of the relationship. And so I love to use the examples Michael Cusick gives in his book called Surfing for God, where he says that there are 3 types of accountability: cop, coach, and cardiac. Cop accountability is like being pulled over and punished for the behavior. I've tried this myself, and I've heard so many things that guys have done, like vowing to quit the softball team or pay the Democrats $500 if they do it again. This is never the solution for true freedom. And if you read through the book of Colossians, you'll see that it isn't even biblical. The Bible calls it self-abasement, or self-punishment is a more meaningful and recent word, contemporary word. You know, quitting the softball team or giving the Democrats $500 may have somewhat the look and feel of humility, but true humility is surrender. Hopefully by now you already realize what we're describing here is also just one more form of behavior management. It doesn't dig up anything, but maybe more heartache and resentment. Coach accountability would be when we confess to the accountability partner and he tells us, "Oh, that's okay, son. Let's have a look at our game plan. Let's make some adjustments to that play." And then he slaps you on the back and he says, "Get back in the game." Well, the only time where this type of accountability is useful in any way, shape, or form is if that new game plan involves digging deep into the root cause and then addressing those roots properly. Cardiac accountability is what we really need. Okay? And this is the only form of accountability that truly helps. Cardiac accountability is digging into the heart, as I've been talking about here with Matthew 15:19. Now, in our program for men called Men in the Battle, we call the accountability partner a mentor. This is someone who has experience working out the root cause of their own problematic sexual behavior. And you give them an account of what all you're doing to dig into the root, into the heart. And they provide ongoing help and feedback because they have been there. They have walked the walk. Now on to our last key. Key number 5 is you must get involved in a closed group. What I mean by closed is it's only open to those who struggle with unwanted sexual behavior, and only those who are the same gender as you. Well, there are so many reasons for a closed group. The one that I want to mention right away is that when you look around the room, or if you're on a Zoom meeting around the screen, you don't have to guess if someone struggles like you or not. The answer is already yes before you even get into the meeting. There is tremendous healing when a group like this comes together, where they're real, they're vulnerable, and all are working toward that common goal of freedom, or maintaining freedom, or continued growth, because we need continued growth for the rest of our life. Continued growth, freedom, the area of digging in to the root cause together. That's what we need in a closed group. Accountability, devotion, and brotherhood. It's extremely powerful. And friend, I have never met anyone who achieved lasting freedom without a group like Men in the Battle that I'm describing here. Now, our Men in the Battle group program, I want to mention this in closing, it's framed around these 5 keys, and it includes video curriculum and worksheets to dig into that root cause and then process the lesson during a closed group in a weekly meeting led by a trained facilitator who has achieved the freedom you want to achieve or maintain, which is also like that mentor that I talked about. We open these groups for enrollment in February and August for a limited time. So friend, you'll be able to find the links in the show notes on how to register for these programs. And I am so honored that you joined me today. I pray that this has been of benefit to your journey. May God bless you.